How do the Philadelphia Eagles get the number one seed in the NFC and catch the Detroit Lions in these final 5 weeks of the season? We'll get into it on this Wednesday edition of Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. I'm Louis DiBiase, joined as always by Gino Camilleri. It's a Wednesday edition of the show, and we're brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. The Eagles have won 8 straight games. They're 10-2, only one game back of the 1 seed behind the Detroit Lions in the NFC. And Gino, today I wanted to kind of just break down, like, how do they realistically catch Detroit? But before we get into those scenarios, I will say I am confident no matter what, though, in the Eagles over Detroit, even if they were the 2 seed. And let's say they do find a way to get to the NFC Championship, and so do the Lions, and the stars align. It's the 1 versus 2, which seems to be the theme a lot in the NFL year after year. Like, that more times than not is what happens in the Final Four. If that does happen, it's not ideal to have the playoffs not run through Philly like it did in 2017 and 2022. But this Eagles football team is so good on the road that I really think they could do it, and I still would favor them over the Lions. They're 6-1 this year when they're not in Philadelphia. They deserve a lot of credit for that.
And I think the Lions are facing their own stretch of injuries on the defensive side of the ball that are going to be hard to overcome. Yeah. Ben Solak had a tweet that basically came down to the point saying that I think it's Aleem McNeil is the only starting defensive lineman that they had to begin the regular season. Yeah, your boy. That's your guy. You would take him over Milton Williams still, but he's the only starter that the Lions have right now on the defensive line, and they're bringing in guys like Jamal Adams to potentially play linebacker for them as well.
Rough.
If you can rely on one thing, Lou, it's that defense travels, and I believe this defense on the road, in a dome environment, we've seen it, Lou. Like what they were able to do down in New Orleans,
yeah,
that was a tough test. That was a really hot New Orleans team. Now, comparing those two teams, you're probably saying, Gino, you sound ridiculous. But in an environment where it's going to be loud and on the road, and you know you're going to have to go silent count when it comes to an offensive perspective, you know your defense is going to be able to take over games. Can your offense do enough? Without a doubt, that run game should translate on the road as well. And like you said, only one loss on the road, and it was that Tampa game that was an anomaly. How many people would pick the Eagles to win that game over Tampa at this point in the season? I think 100 out of 100 people would.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And I think the way the Eagles are built on offense, where they just run the ball down your throats, like that's the perfect antidote to a loud, indoor, crazy Detroit fan base that would, of course, be going nuts about another NFC Championship appearance. So I do think the Eagles are built for that kind of situation if it comes down to that. And, Gino, it's not just this year they've had road success. Like, pretty much the entire run of Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts, they have always been good at away stadiums, and you can't really say that about a lot of contenders. There's some teams that are really, really good at home, and they're just not the same team on the road. The Eagles, like, they never skip a beat no matter where they're going.
It is really a testament, Lou, because if you think back over the Nick Sirianni tenure, that really has been a point of emphasis for them, is that they have to play not just great at home, but on the road as well. And looking at this year in particular, I think last week, for example, was a great
that showed me they can win in Detroit.
Exactly.
That situation. Yeah.
I mean, Baltimore is no schlep of a stadium at all, man. That's a tough fan base.
And that was a big game for them.
It was cold, and the Eagles set the tone.
Yeah.
They can set the tone in a dome. Detroit, for the most part, has played a ton of indoor games this year. Not just at home, on the road as well. They've been playing indoors.
That is why the 1 seed could be important, Gino. Like, give me Jared Goff in the cold.
In the cold, in Philadelphia, Lou, tell me that wouldn't be a huge swing. Now, do you favor them at home versus on the road? 100%. But do you give them an opportunity to win on the road? I think they can handle anybody on the road
Yeah.
at this point in the season if they continue to play this level of football in this fashion. Because like you said, the run game, smash mouth, down your throat, control the clock. That's how you win on the road. And then
9-minute,
defensively, you
10
turn the
play
ball
drive.
over and you keep them off the field. Those are exactly the things you're going to have to do to stop a red-hot Detroit Lions offense. But defensively, watch out for those injuries for Detroit. That is not going to be easy to overcome. They don't have Aiden Hutchinson.
They're banged up. They're really banged up. And, Gino, it's not just the injuries. When you look at their schedule, too, like, yeah, they're one game up on Philly. So, realistically, for the Eagles to catch them, I think they would have to probably go, if they go undefeated, I do think they'll catch Detroit or at least tie them up. If they go 4-1, I think that likely ties them at the top as well, because the Lions' schedule, they're at home against Green Bay tomorrow night. Then they're at home against the Buffalo Bills, in Chicago, in San Francisco, home against Minnesota. That's not an easy stretch. So could I see 2 losses in that stretch? Yeah, I actually think I could. So if the Eagles can go 5-0 or 4-1, I think they could catch them. Now, if it does come down to tiebreakers, if they have the same record, of course, the number one tiebreaker is head-to-head. They have not played this year. Then it's in conference record. The Eagles currently are 6-2 in the NFC. The Lions are 7-1. So if the Lions were to drop 2 games the rest of the way, you would need those in conference. So there is some work to be done, but I really think they could do this if they win out or only drop 1 more game.
And you have to look at the teams that the Eagles are playing at the end of the year as well. You're going to see a checked out a Dallas team. You're going to see a checked out New York team.
You got Carolina this week. There's 2 games that are tough. It's that after this week against Carolina, it's home against Pittsburgh and then in DC. Those are, if you can get one of those and you win the rest, I think you can get this 1 seed.
I think you can win both of those games without a doubt. But let's say you go 4-1 in that stretch. These next 2 games for Detroit, I am not a fan of the Packers. One of my good friends is the most obnoxious Packers fan on earth, and Lou knows how much I despise the Buffalo Bills. But I'll tell you what, I'll never root harder for either of those teams over the next 2 weeks.
Right.
The Eagles need those teams to win. Not need. It would be a nice step in the right direction. I think when the Eagles are home favorites in the playoffs as the 1 seed, history shows that more often than not, they can get to a Super Bowl.
Correct.
I want the 1 seed for the Eagles so they can get an additional bye. Their bye week was week 5, Lou. This team has not had a week off. You're going to say that this team is going to have to go already playing 8 games. They got 5 additional regular
I didn't even think of that.
Games. That's 13. Then you add that wild card game in, and to get to a Super Bowl, that's 4 more. Lou, they're playing 16, 17 straight games. How huge would it be to have that bye and then say, let the rest of them just go to war. They're going to get banged up. The Eagles can get an additional week of rest and then host a playoff game. Regardless, you're going to host 1, maybe 2, possibly 3 playoff games.
Probably
Even
2.
if Detroit is the 1 seed, there still is a chance that they get knocked off. But control your own destiny, Lou. Go and win those games. Detroit does have a tough schedule, but you can't look at your schedule this week and say, oh, yeah, we play Pittsburgh. We're just going to walk over the Panthers. That team has nothing to play for, but besides ruin the Christmases of teams that are already in the playoffs. This is a game you can't overlook. Washington, they're going to have to keep winning. Let's say Tampa and Atlanta keep winning and the teams in the West. Washington is not guaranteed that final wild card spot right now. They're going to want to win that game against the Philadelphia Eagles as well. And you know that even with Dallas and the Giants being checked out on the season, it's a game against the Philadelphia Eagles.
Oh, yeah, they're going to want to spoil the 1 seed for sure. And I think
this isn't a walk in the park at all, Lou.
No, it definitely isn't. I do think there's a path, but again, they need some help. Again, in conference record would be the tiebreaker. If they have the same record, the Eagles would have to finish at least 1 game ahead of Detroit in the conference down the stretch. And let's say that's the scenario where, okay, now they both have the same in-conference record. Then it comes down to the third tiebreaker is common opponent, which is the same. So it goes to strength of all victories. That finally is in favor of Philadelphia. So they got to take care of their own business. They definitely need some help. But, even if it doesn't happen, I'm confident in the Birds going anywhere in the playoffs. But like you said, I think you made a great point to lead us into segment 2. You cannot overlook the Panthers, and this is the exact kind of game you would call like a trap game, a hangover game, and we'll get into that coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. This episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by Mint Mobile. With big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. With Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting again at just $15 a month. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all your existing contacts. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. That's mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL.
This episode of LOE is also brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. If you are an everydayer, you know what Prize Picks is, but if you don't, I'll let you in on a little secret. It is the only and best place to get real money sports actions, and they have handed out over $1 billion in awarded winnings, and it is so easy. It's not you against other people in fantasy football, just you against the Prize Picks projections. All you have to do, pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Devontae Smith practiced today. This might be the first time in a couple weeks that you get the chance to say both Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown are going to have more than their Prize Picks projection when it comes to receiving touchdowns, receiving yards, longest receptions, whatever you can imagine. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive that $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNFL, $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game.
All right, Eagles-Panthers this Sunday, finally a game at Lincoln Financial Field. It feels like this Eagles team has played the entire 2024 season, not at the Link. It's just been so few and far between. They haven't had a lot of home stretches. Luckily, the rest of the way, I believe they only have, one road game left? Yeah, they're home against Carolina, home against Pittsburgh, in D.C., which that's not a far trip either. Home against Dallas, home against the Giants. Finally, some rest for the Eagles in the 2-1-5. And, Gino, they got to be careful, though. Like, you're riding a high. I mean, the last 3 games, that's a crazy impressive stretch that you won, where you beat a Washington Commanders team on primetime football that was red hot. It was a battle for first place in the division. Then you go on the road against a pesky Rams team that's got a good quarterback and a great play caller. You beat them. And then Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry on the road in Baltimore. You win that game. Like the Panthers at home, it seems like a gimme, but got to make sure you take care of business. This is the classic hangover trap kind of matchup.
When a team has nothing to play for except for hopefully getting the number 1 pick, and a guy like Bryce Young, who the team basically already wrote off, is being the quarterback, he's auditioning for next year. There's plenty of guys on this young team, like in Xavier Legette, that you got to worry about. On the defensive side of the ball, there's a name that's going to haunt most Eagles fans' nightmare. Jadeveon Clowney is still playing some pretty good football off the edge there, though. But no, there's some pesky pieces that you have to worry about when it comes to the Panthers. And this is just another step in the right direction for the message that Nick Sirianni, Jalen Hurts, and all of them are kind of in on right now, that they have these expectations that they have to perform to each and every week, and nothing is going to be handed to them. This is that week where you have to preach that more than ever. Guys, we're going to have a huge battle for the Keystone State next week against Pittsburgh at home. That's going to be a tough physical matchup before we finish the season with 3 straight divisional games, Lou. If there was ever a game where the rest of the season you could say these guys might come out there less than 100% and overlook their opponent, it would be this game on the schedule. That can absolutely not happen. Even though you won 8 straight, Detroit continuing to win games and Minnesota continuing to win games.
Yeah, nobody in the North is
these
losing.
Games are important.
Yeah, nobody in the North is losing. Detroit has equally as long a winning streak as you, and Minnesota's pretty much in the same boat quietly. I mean, 10-2, which is unbelievable. So yeah, you got to keep stacking wins. Like, you can't afford to slip up.
Nope.
And Bryce Young, like you said, he's auditioning for that QB1 job. He's doing a pretty damn good job of holding off next year's draft class. Last week against Tampa Bay, 298 yards, a touchdown, no picks. The week before, he almost beat Pat Mahomes and the Chiefs, 263 yards, a touchdown, no picks. He hasn't turned the ball over throwing in over a month. So that's impressive. Like, Bryce, just another guy. Like, I think the theme of quarterback this year in the NFL is like preaching patience because, like you said, Carolina had wrote him off. They had benched him. It was Andy Dalton time. But since Bryce has been back, like, he really has been rejuvenated. And I don't want to say he looks like the number 1 overall pick from a couple years ago, but he looks like a real NFL quarterback. So you got to be careful. And he can extend plays outside of structure, which is what got them last week with Lamar.
And I think you have to quietly worry about Carolina rushing the football.
Chuba Hubbard's good. He's very underrated.
You talk about having a tough assignment last week, taking down Derrick Henry. I think that was a really good way to prepare this week for Chuba Hubbard, another big physical back. And then you're going to have to worry about, you don't think Miles Sanders is going to have a little extra to play for in this game, Lou? You don't think he might want to go and perform and have a nice little comeback game?
I think
is
he
Eagles?
hurt? I don't even know.
He?
I'm not even sure what his situation is.
I mean,
anymore, man.
regardless, I think there are a few pieces you have to worry about. I think the route running of Adam Thielen, you always got to keep that in the back of your mind.
That's good, though, too. Like you said, Xavier is pretty solid.
I like that matchup with Q, another big physical type of corner when he gets on Cooper DeJean. I think that'll be a fun one as well. But another game, Lou, where even if you're not perfect in the first quarter, it might be close up until halftime. I really see the Eagles doing what they have done throughout this stretch against teams that aren't on the same caliber of that, even against teams that are to the caliber of them. They've been able to put them away late in the second half. And what has that been? Saquon Barkley rushing the football. Lou, Saquon Barkley in the second half almost has more yards on the ground than the New York Giants have on the entire season.
His second half rushing, I think, is 4th in the league total. It's at like 924 yards.
He is the closer by every stretch of the imagination. And this is the game.
Yeah.
If you could get those guys out again, like you did in that Dallas game, Lou, with
get them out quick.
10 minutes left in
because, like you said, man, they haven't had a bye week in forever, and if they don't get the 1 seed, like they
need you got to find little moments where you can rest these
like
guys.
2022,
100%.
Yeah, find those times where we're seeing Kenny Pickett in there and Will Shipley. Like, time to evaluate the
dude. If there was ever a time you'd want to see Kenny Pickett,
I want to see Kenny
it's
Pickett
this
on
week.
Sunday.
Yes, please get him in the game.
I do think they should stick to running the ball this week. Carolina is their defense in general is pretty atrocious. They rank dead last in points allowed. They're dead last in rushing defense and third down defense. Like, let Saquon eat for a couple quarters and get those guys out of there. It does sound like, though, good news, too, in the passing game. Devontae Smith returned to practice today. He should be good to go for this one. So out comes Goddard, but at least in comes Devontae.
I'm excited to see how they use those two together once again, because this is another matchup where, yes, it's a very poor team when it comes to defending the run. Yeah. But you should also see AJ winning his one-on-one outside. You should also see Devontae winning his one-on-one outside. JC Horn putting together quietly a decent little season down there. But at the same time, these guys are so good on the outside. Now Kellen Moore is tasked with an assignment without Dallas Goedert once again. How are these role players going to get involved? Well, you have the big two. You know, probably 3 to 4 guys in the coverage are going to be responsible for covering them. How can we win our one-on-ones or scheme some guys open into space? Britton Covey, he most likely isn't going to play yet again. We'll see. Johnny Wilson, I believe he did practice today. It'd be nice if he does come back healthy. They just released Paris Campbell. Some musical chairs behind those big two. Jahan Dotson, it would be nice to see him getting in a little bit of a rhythm in this game, Lou. He should be able to win his assignments and get open. But I don't think passing the ball is the way you win this game. You hit it right on the head. Just maul them in the trenches, get out of this game up 2 or 3 scores in the fourth quarter. Don't overlook them, but just put them away early. This is the type of team that you need to do that to. The schedule makers gave you a little bit of a favor playing most of these games 4 out of the last 5 at home and getting this one at home too. This should be one where fans sit back and relax and they don't got to stress too much.
I hope so. Darius Slay also returned to practice Wednesday, so the Eagles definitely getting healthy at the right time. Coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles, we'll wrap up the show with Agree or Disagree, talking about Jalen Hurts and the MVP conversation. We'll get into it coming up next. This episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers, you can bet $5 and get $150 back in bonus bets if you win your first bet. The FanDuel Sportsbook app, they give you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, all in just one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with, again, $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Take the over on an A.J. Brown 25-plus yard reception on Carolina. I think that's going to hit. Saquon Barkley, I think, will get in the end zone. Same with Jalen Hurts. I think this is a good game to bet on the Eagles at FanDuel. At FanDuel.com, never waste a hunch. Make every moment more. With FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, wrapping up this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast with Agree or Disagree. And Gino, we've talked a lot about the Eagles and the MVP conversation this year, and it's been about Saquon Barkley at running back. FanDuel right now has him with the second best MVP odds, only behind Buffalo Bills quarterback Josh Allen. But I do wonder, like, if the Eagles get the 1 seed over the Lions, and let's say Jalen Hurts has a couple big games. If you look at his numbers right now, they're pretty similar. If you do total yardage and total touchdowns combined, he's right on par with Josh Allen, who's the MVP favorite. I do wonder if he could find his way into the mix at MVP. Do you think he could get in the race, or are the numbers just too behind and with Saquon there? Like, do Saquon and Hurts almost cancel each other out?
That's the thing. If they win in the fashion that we know that they usually do, it is Saquon Barkley having the upper hand in this conversation. But like you said, if Jalen Hurts all of a sudden has a couple games where he goes 2 or 3 touchdown passes, adds another one on the ground, he has tied for 7th the longest odds to win MVP with Jordan Love right now at plus 6,500. Goes Josh Allen minus 280, Saquon plus 500, Lamar plus 850, Mahomes plus 1,500 tied with Goff at plus 1,500, and then a huge drop to plus 6,500 between those two. At plus 6,500, I would sprinkle a little bit of cash on that, Lou, because these are games where you want to talk about padding the stats a little bit. You're going to have the dreadful secondaries of the 2 bottom NFC East teams at the end of the season. You're going against the Panthers this week. Pittsburgh's going to be tough. That's going to be a tough one.
But what if he dominates Pittsburgh? Like, he could put himself in the MVP talk.
That would be the game. That and Washington would be the game where it's like, okay, they close out these 2 teams, the 2 toughest tests remaining on their schedule. How could he not be? And then all of a sudden, let's say the Bills slip up and they lose a couple towards the end of the season and Josh throws a couple interceptions. And
I think at that point, he'd be more likely to win it over Saquon. If he has a couple big games, I just, again, don't think they'll give it to a running back unless it's a record-breaking season. And if the quarterback of a team that got the 1 seed who has a couple big games down the stretch does that, I think he would have a case. Like right now, I don't think he does. You haven't seen those monster performances. He has the fewest passing attempts in the league this year for a starter. Like currently in this situation, like you said, the way they're winning, no, it is Saquon. But I do think there is a scenario where you could say, actually, Jalen has a better chance than Saquon does.
Right now, Saquon is the favorite at minus 470 to win offensive player of the year. So he more than likely is going to win that award. The thing about MVP is even though it's like when there's a tie in the House or the Senate and the speaker or the vice president gets a vote, that vote is always going to go to quarterback. It'll never favor a position that is not the one throwing the football.
And, if you have two MVP candidates on the same team, I feel like the committee is going to be like, well, how can he be the most valuable player in football when he's got another guy right next to him?
You'd have to give them co-MVPs.
So I just feel like they're going to say something like that and give it to lean towards more of a Josh Allen. But I will say, here's a good thing. The Eagles, the last two times they had not the MVP winner, but the runner-up, they did make the Super Bowl that year. So maybe we want the second guy in the voting, not number one. Because it's bode well for the Birds the last few years it's happened.
Outside of the Wentz one, those players have usually come back and been all right.
But even without Wentz, like they won a title that year when they had the second MVP player. Same with 2022, they got to the Super Bowl.
The thing is, like, I don't see Josh losing it at this point just because...
Unless the Ravens won the division. Like, unless Baltimore got the North, I think Lamar wins it. But, what were you going to say about the lateral?
Dude, the play where he throws it to Amari Cooper and then Amari Cooper laterals it to Josh Allen.
In a blizzard.
Josh Allen scores. Cool. That's the Heisman type of moment, right? I know. But to even be having this discussion once again.
It's fun, man.
That's why 2023 was also bad, was because in 2022, we're saying Jalen is a perennial MVP caliber player, but yet we're not talking about him as such. Even to be in the top 10 of the conversation, that's worth the contract he's getting, Lou. If you're going to say anything else that he's not, that he's underperforming, you're wrong. There's nothing else to say. He's playing within the context of what they have to do incredibly well over the last 8 weeks, and that's why he is there right now. It's not the first 4 games. That was so wishy-washy. It's the last 8 games, and he has been incredible in that stretch.
Well, yeah, I think he's showing his value this year by understanding, the value of others on his team and adjusting.
Cool.
So
good quote, Lou.
I mean, love the one-liner. That's not going to win him this award, but I mean, he's showing his value to the Eagles by switching up his role in 2024.
Yeah, I don't care if he lifts the award. I don't think he cares.
He doesn't either. He wants to lift the Lombardi, and he wants to be Super Bowl MVP, and that's a better chance I think of happening than winning MVP for sure. But again, team first, got to get the 1 seed. That's the focus. Got another game to help get closer to Detroit against the Carolina Panthers. Gino will do crossover Thursday tomorrow with the guys over at Locked On Panthers. Got Friday's show as well, LOE3. All that and more coming your way. Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. Thanks as always for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.